Mucha Lucha is an insane show that has brought together people from all over the world. It's so cool to see comments praising the show as one of the first cartoons to showcase Hispanic culture, even if the show's creators aren't Mexican themselves. New talent joins the crew of Mucha Lucha's second season with some really notable names like Jorge Gutierrez, the creator of El Tigre and director of Book of Life. Last time I covered season 1 in its entirety, so today I'm going to cover all of season 2, so let's just jump right into the first episode. So the first thing you may notice is the quirky little intro segments from each episode are gone, which makes me pretty sad. They were a great way to set up the episode, and some of them I find as memorable as the actual episodes themselves.
A true luchador knows that good or bad isn't something you are, but a choice you make, like flour or corn tortillas.
On the other hand, you may notice the season looks a lot cleaner with much more fluid animation, and the backgrounds and colors are a lot more vivid. The episode starts with Ricochet and his father reviewing some footage of Ricochet's last fight, in which he lost to El Haystack Grande, who, according to the Mucha Lucha wiki, shares his name with the famous British wrestler Giant Haystacks. But his design is more related to Los Espantapajaros, this evil scarecrow trio that wrestled in AAA. This episode really builds up the title of Luchador Supreme, which Ricochet wants to become someday. I really like the angle they build up of a very difficult, nearly impossible goal, while also giving the series an overarching plot. It kinda gives me anime vibes, like Naruto trying to become the leader of his village, and regardless of what's currently happening, this goal is always at the back of your mind. Ricochet saves this smelly old man, Senor Senior Citizen, from a car crash, and he gives Ricochet this weird espionage technology that helps him fight his opponents, like a shag carpet treadmill that turns Ricochet into a ball of static shock. The episode plays out like a James Bond parody, and Ricochet's British accent is so bad, it actually kind of wraps around to not being too bad, I guess.
Ah, a lively hand of Lucio. Count me in.
So it is funny to note, co-creator Eddie Moore was born in the UK. You may already know that, but it makes some episodes and scenes like this that much more funny. The rest of the episode is like a James Bond parody of Ricochet suavely escaping from the Harry Knuckles Academy goons, using his new technology, but in his rematch with El Haystack Grande, remembers the encouraging words of his father. So Ricochet puts the car away, cause he can just do that, you know, technology, and puts El Haystack Grande in a half Nelson with a full hitch, just like his dad suggested from their video review earlier. It's a fun first episode to start this season, nothing too crazy, but I appreciate how they build up the scale of becoming the top luchador, which I feel is seen even more in the third season, so let's keep moving on with Season 2. In episode 2, the Flea becomes Bueno Flea, donning a pure white version of his suit, and I've read several comments that thought the Flea was a bunny for some reason. Like, did his name being the Flea not mean anything? But I gotta admit, this white version of the Flea actually does look pretty rabbit-like. The episode's all about the Flea becoming even more pure than Buena Girl and creating his own book of masked wrestling, even going as far as snitching on Buena Girl. I think the biggest takeaway from this episode is that Buena Girl is a complex character and isn't nearly as one-dimensional as one may think. She has flaws and can be a bit clueless, and still knows to have fun and stuff. If she sees a quarter on the ground, she'll pick it up, as opposed to doing what the Flea does here, which is a DNA test to return it to its rightful owner, which so happens to be Minotauro, the richest kid in town who doesn't even care to have it back. The episode ends with a fight between Buena Girl and the Flea, where she kicks a donut into his mouth, causing his whole body to crinkle. Like, these donuts are so insane, they give you carpal tunnel. I like this episode, especially because Buena Girl is my favorite character, and it shines a bit of light on her imperfections, as well as her loyalty to the Book of Masked Wrestling. But the Flea is by far the most popular part of Mucha Lucha, and for good reason, so it's kind of funny to see what it'd be like without him here, too. This episode starts off as a Nightmare on Elm Street parody, with Ricochet being chased by the shape-shifting demon luchador, Misterioso Grande, but wakes up just before he gets got. I know this is like the Mucha Lucha equivalent of a race car bed, weird, but I love this setup. It looks really comfy to me, I don't know why. We see Penny Plutonium doesn't show up to school because she also has the same nightmares Ricochet has, and if you get your mask removed in the dream, it gets removed for real. Ricochet enters the dream world through this elaborate sleep invention Penny's dad created, and they have a really imaginative fight sequence like Ricochet's arm turning into a fly swatter or a mallet. The dream demon turns into a giant rock, but Ricochet turns into paper because paper covers rock, and I don't mean to always complain about the flaws of rock, paper, scissors, but a comment did point out they play scissors, dynamite, rock because not only does rock break scissors, but scissors cuts the fuse to the dynamite, which would explode the rock. That's pretty genius. Ricochet goes one step further here, like you'd never guess what would beat scissors.
Oh yeah? Well, nothing beats Tidal Wave!
Really? Nothing? I don't know, the sun maybe? What is the limits of this game inside their imaginations? It's a pretty fun episode. Relatively simple, but with a fun concept and parody, so let's move on. This episode is The Revenge of the Masked Toilet, which was one of my favorite episodes from season 1. The Flea still seems to be scared of the Masked Toilet, despite them defeating him last season, and he actually shows up in the boys' bathroom at school, which seems like a pretty bad idea, cause like, you got wrestlers lining up now to fight the toilet. He challenges the Flea to an elimination match to take place after school that day, so Ricochet and Buena Girl train the Flea to overcome his fear of the toilet, but he can't even defeat a stationary, unpossessed toilet. The Flea realizes the answers to his problems are inside of him and shares the answers inside of him with the toilet, if you catch my drift. As crass as this joke is, I will praise the episode for foreshadowing the Flea's increasing bowel issues. Like, the Flea starts the episode eating garbage off the ground in the school, and they just play this little sequence. Episode 3 starts with the Luchadors going to Little Tokyo to help out El Gundamo, this kaiju-themed wrestler, who needs their help fighting these monsters taking over. Despite the kaiju theme, El Gundamo is a reference to Gundam, the famous space mecha and build kit franchise. As you may expect for an episode of a show coming out in 2003, it portrays Japan in a very whimsical yet hyper way. It reminds me a little bit of Kappa Mikey's portrayal of Japan, and while that show rubs a lot of people the wrong way, it's always been one of my favorite shows, and I felt the main comedy came from just these young adults in a typical sitcom situation. The episode features giant sushi monsters destroying Little Tokyo that Ricochet, Buena Girl, and the Flea destroy as El Gundamo runs away and says he was defeating some other monsters or something. Later we meet Kyoto, the monster warden of Little Tokyo, and El Gundamo's master. This tiny pink bunny has a control room where he reveals Gundamo hid while everyone else fought, but this giant King Prawn attacks the building, turning them into sushi and throwing them across town. Buena Girl and Ricochet convince Gundamo to help them take out King Prawn, while Kyoto uses his telekinetic powers to bring the prawn towards the water before passing out. Gundamo uses his signature move, Tsunami Slam, to push King Prawn into the sea, awakening his warrior's heart and saving the day. It's a cool episode with a lot of fun aspects, like I really love a lot of the backgrounds here. And while jokes of Japanese stuff being really energetic and wacky may be a little passé nowadays, you have to keep in mind there wasn't too many depictions of Japan or kaijus in a lot of cartoons at this time, at least outside of the ones heavily inspired by anime like Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab. In the second half of episode 3, Ricochet can't find anything because his room is a pigsty, to the point where opening the door to his room has junk explode out of the whole house. While cleaning his room, Ricochet bumps into the Flea, who says he could only dream of having a room this messy, which is actually pretty nice foreshadowing, because we see a grown-ass man with a wife and kids living in Ricochet's closet and just destroys his room once again. Ricochet challenges this pig wrestler, El Porcino, to a fight, and he uses pig-themed moves like the Salami Slam, destroying Ricochet's room even further. Even the kids turn into slices of meat and start attacking Ricochet, so in a heroic act of self-sacrifice, El Rey dives in with his broom, obliterating upon impact. The death of El Rey inspires Ricochet, who uses his new move, the Hero Sandwich, and this is really creepy. Like, I can imagine seeing this when I get a glass of water in the middle of the night. So Ricochet cleans his room and saves the day, but El Porcino has moved on to the Flea's room now, which is actually a happy ending for everyone. This is like one of the few episodes from the season I feel like I remembered before this rewatch, and I don't know why. I think I just thought it was so creepy this grown-ass man lives in Ricochet's closet before he was even born. A lot of comments point out watching this show all the time, but not really remembering much about it, and while that may seem kinda sad or disparaging of the writing, to me, I see this as more of a testament to how fun Mucha Lucha is in the moment. Like, there's not much overarching plot or situations you'll remember, but when you just sit back and relax, it's a really, really fun time. Ricochet, Buena Girl, and the Flea go to a town that idolizes Ricochet's father, Lone Star. They accidentally knock down a statue of Lone Star, and the town thinks Ricochet is him, I guess because they have like the same mask, so they treat Ricochet like royalty, while Buena Girl insists this honor should be earned. Things seem to be going well, but Ricochet gets challenged to a fight by this giant wrestler with a brick wall for a body.
Volunteer? Just you and me in the arena tonight.
They debate running away, but Ricochet says he made this ring and now he has to wrestle in it. That night, just before the fight starts, the real Lone Star shows up, but Ricochet ties him to the side of the ring and wants to take responsibility for his lies, apologizing to the people of the town and fighting El Pared, which means the wall. And I gotta wonder, does he just wear these bricks like a suit of armor? It seems like a really good idea. I don't know if he's just really strong and can wear bricks, whereas other wrestlers can't do this, but he gets defeated by Ricochet's Wrecking Ball of Honesty, so he can't be too strong, I guess. Next up, the Flea's excited to show off his wrestling prowess to his younger sister, Pulguita, whose name means Little Flea, and kinda makes more sense in the Spanish dub, cause the Flea's name here is La Pulga. The Flea loses to the skeleton wrestler, Skel Antonio, and then Pulguita crawls into the ring, dodging his attack and winning the fight. We already know Pulguita may be the strongest character in Mucha Lucha since she defeated the Masked Toilet last season, so I had total faith in her here. The Flea's really jealous of his little sister, who even goes on to defeat Mini Toro, and while the Flea struggles with jealousy, he's still actually pretty supportive of his sister, and then all the other wrestlers come up and harass the Flea for like no reason.
If I had a sister like Pulguita, I'd give up masked wrestling and become a mariachi singer.
Nah, if she said that to me, there'd be free candy for everyone. I'm just saying. So the Flea challenges Pulguita to a match, and the sign out front would be really funny in Spanish, La Pulga versus Pulguita, but as you may know, a lot of Spanish dubbed cartoons will just narrate over English text being displayed.
La Pulga contra Pulguita.
It seems really distracting at first, but it's actually a pretty fun way to watch shows, especially if you're studying Spanish. A couple people claimed I said mucha gucha in the first video. Mucha luchas, but I don't hear it, I don't know. Pulguita easily defeats the Flea here and moves on to her biggest opponent yet, El Perro Salvaje.
Lost in the woods and was raised by werewolves. He's wrestled dinosaurs, the planet Jupiter, and even a giant Himalayan devilfish.
Why is a Himalayan devilfish said after defeating the planet Jupiter? I feel like destroying the largest planet in the galaxy is a little more notable. The Flea sees his sister struggling against this crazed wrestler and teaches her his signature move. Episode 5 starts with all the luchadors learning new skills at the community center so they can approach masked wrestling with a wider array of skills. It kinda reminds me of how some football players actually have done ballet to help strengthen their ankles and footwork. Ricochet joins the soccer team and fights against Futbol Loco, who seems to be a parody of Lionel Messi, we can assume, from his Argentinian jersey, long hair, and the timeline of this episode releasing right around the time Messi entered the soccer world. We see this prodigy player is also a prodigy flopper, falling to the ground in pain when Ricochet doesn't even touch him.
Penalty! Hey, Ricochet never touched him.
Of course not. But what great acting!
And soccer's always had this reputation. If anything, I think the sentiment's grown even stronger nowadays. Ricochet challenges this little Messi to a penalty kick shootout and wins, and we see Ricochet apply these skills in the ring with a new signature move, Blazing Feet of Fury. It's kind of funny seeing all the luchadors use their new skills in combat, like Buena Girl has anchor arms from joining the marching band and playing the Albanian accordion. I don't think the Albanian accordion is a real thing, but I did read a lot about Albanian folk music while trying to find anything on this, so I kinda chalk it up to Mucha Lucha's randomness, kinda like how the flea learns the bagpipes and makes Megawatt's head explode, which is actually pretty crazy.
Thank you, Scotland!
This episode starts with Buena Girl throwing a party and wanting to invite famous masked wrestler Rey Dynamico, who's obviously a Rey Mysterio homage. You know, between Rey Mysterio and Mucha Lucha, I'd imagine this is how a ton of Americans learned what masked wrestling was in the first place. Buena Girl wants to make sure the party's cool and grown up for this wrestler, so she throws out all the childish games like pin the tail on the Chupacabra. But you know, that's actually kinda badass. Buena Girl's teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, however, does not like being thrown out and plays a song that puts everyone in a trance and just causes chaos. This song is so cursed, like not just in the episode, it was stuck in my head the entire day. I think the only way I can get it out of my head is by passing it on to you, so here you go.
No?
As the chaos builds up, Buena Girl admits her love for her teddy bear, and you can make an argument this is one of the best line reads in the whole show. It's so dramatic.
I love you, bunches. Mr. Buttons! Why? Why did you do this to me?
Rey Dynamico shows up, and although Buena Girl is sad and embarrassed for loving her teddy bear, the famous masked wrestler reveals he also had a Mr. Buttons plush as a kid, even using him here to help defeat the party clown Bobo to end the episode. Before I move on, if you're not subscribed yet, why? Stop
it.
Or start that. In episode 6, Ricochet's been cursed by a chain letter, which is such a mid-2000s thing. I'd see them all the time in YouTube comment sections like, don't delete, if you're reading this, I'm dead, send to 10 people. So Ricochet doesn't send it to 10 people and gets bad luck, like Masked Dog chasing a squirrel, and they run into Ricochet's mask, stretching it out before bursting out of his head, and it looks really graphic, like something you'd see out of a horror movie. There's a big wild goose chase for the chainmail, chasing it on a farm under the sea, outer space, and I think it really shows off the jumps up in quality this season, especially with the backgrounds. Although they're unsuccessful in retrieving the letter, we see Ricochet incidentally saved a cat, the mayor, a satellite, and was just overall a very bueno person. Teaching us that it's hard work that makes an impact, not spreading stupid chainmail in the comments. Actually, I'm gonna post a chainmail in the comments somewhere. If you could all reply to that chainmail thread, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, the chainmail wasn't actually for Ricochet, but Buena Girl, who despite not believing in it the whole episode, frantically runs after it now, which is a pretty funny little character moment for Buena Girl, who as we know, isn't perfect. In the next episode, the flea gets turned really small from a shrink ray Penny Plutonium invented, so the flea has to live among the roaches he was trying to kill for eating his donuts. Ricochet and Buena Girl are the big bad villains here, and the flea's like a luchador, Aaron Yeager, trying to save everyone, getting distracted at random points along the way.
Hey, what's the rush, young fella? Slow down. Have a glass of lemonade.
Okay. The flea is un poquito parched.
The random Spanglish is always a bit jarring, but funny to me. Random lines like this always remind me of the Primos controversy when people on Twitter said we need shows by real Hispanic creators, like Mucha Lucha, which actually didn't have Hispanic creators. But as I mentioned before, there's a lot more complex details to the situation, like with culture consultants, and prolific additions to the cast, like Jorge Gutierrez. But I just thought the Spanglish was interesting to bring up, because if you watch this show in Spanish growing up, it's not really involved. Like, Buena Girl is just Buena Niña. They don't try to shoehorn English into the dub. You could even make an argument that Spanglish adds to the cartoony nature of the show, or that it's kinda irrelevant. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it either way. This is also probably the best time to talk about the Mucha Lucha Tazos, which you may know more as Pogs in America. These little collectible discs have Mucha Lucha characters on them. As we can see here, some of the bags of chips these would be collected from. I bought some on eBay to show off, but they'll probably be here in time for part 3, so stick around for that next time. The Flea gets Masked Dog to help him stop Ricochet before he sprays his purple cockroach friend Wilbur, who oddly enough also has his own Tazo, which is so funny, like they really be giving them to anyone. As the Flea dives in to save Wilbur, Pleniputonium's Grow Ray hits the Flea, who tells Ricochet and Buena Girl that bugs are people too, and they just want to eat donuts, just like them. But then Penny uses the Grow Ray feature again, giving us a giant cockroach breaking through the ceiling who craves donuts. It's a pretty imaginative episode and does pose a funny scenario. Like, the Flea is so filthy, making him super small really would put him in a community in which he'd flourish. Episode 7 starts with Buena Girl competing in the Oaxacan Radish Carving Festival, a real-life event that takes place in Oaxaca City, Mexico each December. This actually looks so cool. I'd love to check this out someday, and it's cool to have little tidbits of Oaxacan and Mexican culture featured in the show. Buena Girl makes a carving of the King of Radishes, who will be judging the competition while the Flea struggles desperately to break a plate, a Oaxacan tradition to signify good luck. The King of Radishes goes missing, and I'm pretty sure this is just a made-up title for the episode, but I don't know, you can never be too safe. There's this giant turnip wrestler who kidnaps the King of Radishes, and they can't even stop him because he only fights vegetables or soy boys or something. I don't get why they don't just fight him anyways. I guess maybe it's a rule of luchadors to respect this, but he just beats up Buena Girl's statue of the Radish King. They learn this turnip guy just wants to be loved and to fit in, and they decide maybe next time he'll have the Turnip Festival on another date. I guess that'd be a good idea, because I've read you have to wait in line for hours and hours for the Radish Festival, but I also feel like there's no better time than during the Radish Festival to have another vegetable-based sculpture contest. Just like collaborate or advertise or something, I don't know. Also, I like the winner of the Radish Festival, full-size, mid-sized car. The latter half of the episode starts with Ricochet and Buena Girl trying to give Masked Dog a bath. They can't get any control of him, and he slips away, causing a mess, leaving them to resort to the most cunning person they know, the Flea. I can't think of a worse person to help with cleanliness, but I guess they are pretty desperate. The Flea and Masked Dog escape, and I really like this moment.
I can't believe the Flea betrayed us.
Get real, Buena Girl.
That's so real. There was hatred behind that. The Flea leaves behind a note stating that they hate baths and will be going somewhere where their filth is appreciated. Like, where are you gonna go? A Smash tournament? They actually go to a garbage dump where they become these unholy abominations compromised of layers of junk, and this really activates my fight or flight. This is so unsettling. So the Flea and Masked Dog escape again, but can't even get donuts because of how gross they are. It is pretty ironic the Flea's family are the ones to run the donut shop, but yeah, even they're like, nah, you're gonna get us shut down. So the Flea and Masked Dog decide it's probably good to get clean every once in a while, ending the episode with the polished white Flea that looks like a rabbit, and he sprays Ricochet and Buena Girl with a hose, who've just come around and learned how fun it is to play in the mud. Overall, it's a fine episode, kinda reminds me of the episode of SpongeBob where he tries to give Gary a bath, but they really took a unique spin on this with having the animal escape and seeing how the aftermath plays out. Episode 8 has all the luchadors trash-talking, embracing the rudo aspects to lucha libre. Ricochet suggests challenging French Twist since he's a mime who doesn't talk, but he actually can talk and is really good at it.
I wanted a brain like yours, but the dollar store was closed.
Challenging someone who voluntarily doesn't speak is such a bad idea. Like, can you imagine the pent-up yapping stored inside of them? He doesn't really use his mind powers anymore though, and just talks about what he's gonna do instead. And I like to think in order to be a proper mime and get your magic mind powers, you must take an oath of silence or something. Ricochet convinces French Twist to wrestle with his unique style, telling him to shut up and use his silent signature moves. French Twist ends up defeating Potato Patata Jr. by dropping invisible weights on him and protecting himself in an invisible box. I thought French Twist's voice sounded familiar here, so I looked up the other voice acting roles of his VA, Lee Takar, and while he voices some side characters like El Gundamo or Double Ninja Ninja, the non-Mucha Lucha role I think I recognized here the most was the voice of Yakety Yak. Yeah, remember Yakety Yak? So it's kind of fun to see here, and it's fun to have an episode dedicated to French Twist. It really gives me a new appreciation for him. The latter half starts with Ricochet fighting against Carlton from the Hairy Knuckles Academy, who throws a literal train at him. But Ricochet's big takeaway from this is that he needs a theme song, cause his entrance with the flea on the bagpipes just wasn't cutting it. So he gets the real band, Los Lobos, originally known as Los Lobos del Este de Los Angeles. They're a pretty accomplished group, winning 4 Grammys, even performing at the White House. The theme song of Mucha Lucha is actually sung by the group Chicos de Barrio, so I thought that would have been a funny meta reference, but it's still so cool to have these Mexican-American bands involved with the show. Ricochet learns he just needs to be himself here and wins the rematch, even fighting a 3-on-3 with the Hairy Knuckles Academy alongside the Lobos de Lucha. We ultimately end in a little musical number, and it's always fun to see the wrestlers dance like in the theme song. They're just so fluid and goofy, I can't look away. In episode 9, the Flea takes over the family donut shop along with the help of Ricochet and Buena Girl. Part of me does wonder what Mucha Lucha's obsession with donuts is. On creator Eddie Mort's Tumblr blog, when I asked him how the show got the title Mucha Lucha, he said the original title was gonna be Lucha School, but they felt WB didn't want the word Lucha in the title for lack of familiarity. They even offered a box of Krispy Kreme donuts for whoever came up with the name of the show, which in hindsight doesn't sound like a big award, but you may not remember how big Krispy Kreme was back then. I vividly remember lines wrapping around the outside of the building in the early 2000s. So things go surprisingly well, but a new donut shop opens next door with free donuts, and competition breeds innovation as we see the Flea create a new donut. The competition between the two is so funny, like the shop next door has donuts with real money filling, and like people are rushing over to eat money? Are they paying for these? Cause I would just buy the donut and put it in my wallet or something. It's an investment. The Flea counters with bloodshot eyeball donuts with jelly beans for pupils, and I don't know why this would beat money-filled donuts, but you know, if you're watching Mucha Lucha for sound logic, I got bad news for you. The two donut shops eventually turn into giant robot mechas and just have this all-out battle. It's such a fun time and easily my favorite episode of the season so far. It also feels like the most anime-inspired episode so far, even more than the Little Tokyo episode, which kind of felt like a parody of a parody, and you won't notice just yet, but we'll see many, many more mecha robots this season. In the next episode, Ricochet learns the skills needed to be a proper manager for a luchador, such as motivating and promoting the wrestler. Unfortunately, Ricochet's failing the class cause his managee, if that's a word, is Coco Demento, the demented clown wrestler who's never won a match before. We see him fight this wrestler tic-tac-toe, and like, how do you lose to tic-tac-toe? I feel like tic-tac-toe's literally impossible to lose, assuming you don't throw. Ricochet tries his best to get Coco Demento to win, but Coco'd rather entertain the crowd with whoopee cushions and getting caught intentionally. In a way, this highlights a very real entertainment aspect to wrestling, like how good people sell hits and stuff. Coco's dad insists his son becomes a rodeo clown, and Ricochet follows him, hyping him up as his manager still, where Coco manages to survive by making the bulls laugh. Coco then applies these new skills to his rematch against Tic-Tac-Toe, and has a whole new rodeo-themed arsenal with bull horns and kicks, but the crowd boos him, wanting him to be funny again. Coco eventually submits, throwing the match for everyone's entertainment and teaching Coco's father, along with headmistress, that pinning isn't everything. I love the concept that Coco's really competent but chooses to be funny instead, and I do wonder if Coco would be a successful wrestler in this universe just off his entertainment factor alone. I guess I never really thought of the economy of the Mucha Lucha universe before now. In episode 10, Ricochet trains for a competition against Potato Patata Jr. for this replica El Rey mask, training with his successful coach, Stamina, which means stamina in Spanish, if you didn't know. We learn Ricochet's head's abnormally large and must be held up by some kind of gases or something, which is a pretty funny meta-observation of the show's design philosophy, but like, would this also mean Buena Girl has the same issue? Cause they've got like the exact same head shape. Ricochet's new small head and low center of gravity makes him incredibly overpowered, avoiding headlocks and just being really strong, which would be great, except when it gets to the finals, we see the El Rey mask will now be awarded to the runner-up, not the winner. So Ricochet tries to throw the match against Junior, but just ricochets all around the ring and ends up winning donuts instead. I was wondering how this situation was gonna go wrong, like is Ricochet's head gonna explode or something? So changing the prize and making Ricochet so strong he can't lose is a pretty funny twist. Ricochet's disappointed and learns not to change himself for others or something. You know, it's hard to say this is a strong moral when it comes off more as don't change to get what you want, cause the prize might change and you might suffer from success. But all's well that ends well, cause Potato Patata Jr. comes into the donut shop and asks to trade the mask for donuts. And you know, I was actually thinking the whole time, just ask Junior to trade, he'd love donuts. But in the end, we see the replica mask is a size small, so Ricochet can never even wear it. But, you know, if that were me, I don't think I'd wear it either. It's more of like a nice decoration you don't want to get dirty or anything. Overall, it's a decent episode with fun little action sequences, like seeing Ricochet fight on the tournament bracket is such a fun, creative visual. I just had to mention it before moving on. The next episode has Lone Star's brothers moving into Ricochet's home, and they're a pretty chaotic tag team, kind of like a Dumb and Dumber, who just break everything every time they come over. Ricochet's working on a model luchador arena for class, and when his uncles break it, they suggest replacing it with a giant churro. And seeing this giant churro just reminds me I never got one from Costco before they were discontinued for the double chocolate chunk cookie. So if you've ever had one, can you please let me know if you like them or not? Because I hear people either loved them or hated them, and I have FOMO. This episode's so chaotic, there's really no way I can recap it properly. Like, they go on a churro where there's a train, and Abuelito needs fruit to use as tools to fix Ricochet's arena model, and then they grab this pineapple wrestler off the street because they don't have pineapple. I definitely like episodes a little more plot driven, but this episode actually has a really nice flow for being so crazy, and it's a fun watch. In the end, we learn the importance of family when the brothers find Mama's Lucha Libre Forever necklace she lost, which was the reason they came over in the first place. Ultimately, it's pretty cool to learn more about Ricochet's family. There's a lot of fun production notes from the blog about their family I could talk about all day, like how Ricochet originally wasn't gonna have a father and just be raised by his mother, and how Lone Star's name was originally Silver Bullet, cause like a bullet ricochets and stuff. So let's move on. In episode 11, the students celebrate the Day of the Dead with dioramas, but when Masked Dog eats Ricochet's diorama, he's forced to be the personal guide for the spirit coming to visit the class. Calavera Muerto, which means dead skull. I really like this design. It definitely looks like something Jorge Gutierrez would have made, considering one of his defining aesthetics to me is his implementation of texture as we see on this spirit's skull. Calavera Muerto just wants to play video games all day, and I do wonder when this spirit may have passed away, cause like, as boring as it may seem, it kinda reminds me of the memes of like, imagine giving blank to a Victorian child. Like, a video game would be the most amazing thing ever for a kid who's never seen them before. All the other spirits leave the town, except this one who challenges Ricochet to a fight, with the loser being sent back to the spirit world. And I gotta say, a fight against a spirit inside a video game with the loser being sent back to the spirit world for the Day of the Dead is an amazing concept. The luchadors remember a lesson from class that a spirit leaves once they're full, so Ricochet just forces bread and stuff into his skull until he's full enough to leave, and as cursed as this might look, no pun intended, I do really appreciate the episode's intention intentions of teaching more about the Day of the Dead. Like, nowadays it doesn't feel too unique. I read a lot of criticisms that it feels like we've got like 5 Mexican movies all about Day of the Dead, and there's more to Mexico beyond this. But I do appreciate this episode for giving us a nice insight to real facets of Mexican culture at a time where there wasn't a whole ton you'd see on TV, at least in the United States. In the next episode, Mask Maker, Ricochet goes to a replica mask maker, Antonio Mascara, who gets arrested for not having a license, which by extent makes Ricochet's mask illegal. So they have to travel to this remote village to find Antonio's mentor, cause I guess he has a license or something, but we see the mentor doesn't make masks anymore, and the reason why he doesn't teach Antonio is because he was a bad student who couldn't sew scary masks. I guess it's interesting to infer Antonio's really interested in the aesthetics and glamour of masks, maybe more than the culture behind them. Antonio doesn't really get a redemption or anything, we just learn Ricochet's mask wasn't remade, it was just cleaned, so it's technically still legal. And the police didn't show up here to arrest Ricochet for an illegal mask, but for something you would never guess in a million guesses. They're here to get the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West, which the headmistress has stolen for some reason, flying out to end the episode. So it's nice to note The Wizard of Oz has canonically taken place in the Mucha Lucha universe. And for as random as Mucha Lucha is, I can't think of a single more random moment. You may be familiar with the phrase jumping the shark, a term for something being so random or unrelated, like you could say, oh, this ending really jumped the shark. Well, did you know this comes from an episode of Happy Days where the Fonz ride over a shark tank? You might actually recognize this reference in Ned's Declassified, paying homage to this with BMX rider Matt Hoffman jumping a shark. So I just find it really interesting for a show as random as Mucha Lucha to have a jumping the shark moment, or maybe a riding the broomstick moment. In episode 12, Buena Girl's parents have a new fitness program called Buena Bods, and it comes with all these extra add-ons like an onion juicer and a popsicle, which is a great segue to show you guys this popsicle of Ricochet I saw on the Mucha Lucha blog during my research, cause it stares into my soul. Buena Girl doesn't like the insane commercial takeover from her parents as it goes against the Coda Libre, which Buena Girl points out means free, in case you didn't know. When she confronts her parents, they're so inspired by their daughter, they make an energy bar in her likeness, and actually this is more cursed than the popsicle, never mind. But even Buena Girl's morals have a price, as she now has fame and fortune from her energy bar, but unfortunately the 3 Masketeers have a tag team match at school this afternoon, and Ricochet and the Flea will forfeit without their friends showing up. Although they make it to the fight, Buena Girl's too distracted from meetings and phone calls, and they get beat up pretty badly here. But seeing her friends are in need, Buena Girl has a realization of her love for the Lucha Libre lifestyle and uses the Bulldozer of Truth to beat up all 5 other wrestlers, including the 2 on her team. Buena Girl's parents even respect her wishes of not selling the energy bars anymore, but that might just be because not selling them will make the price go up. It's kinda interesting to speculate maybe being Buena is all an act from Buena Girl's parents. Like, they're all wholesome just to create this commercial empire and sell these candy bars. Like, her parents are like Mr. and Mrs. Beast. Ricochet's mama competes in Yo Mama, not that old MTV show where people made Yo Mama jokes at each other, but a wrestling competition between mothers. It's cool to learn Mama Maniaca is one of the strongest moms in the world and isn't just in the kitchen or buying hoop earrings all day. She fights against this Mayan-themed wrestler, Maya Moderna, and her kitchen work prepared her well because she wins with moves like flipping Flapjack of Fury. Mama tells Ricochet to bring the trophy home, and he instantly loses it, which we learn was stolen from him by Maya Moderna. They find her in the ancient Mayan city, Chichen Itza, and we get a really fun Super Mario World montage in the temple that really sounds like the Super Nintendo sound font. Mama Moderna puts the trophy in the temple wall, which revives this ancient Mayan, and I guess we just presume he's evil because the trio just starts trying to beat him up for no real reason. Ricochet empowers all the love he has for his mama using the flapjack flipper move and causing the mummy to slip by turning into a bar of soap. But upon closer examination, he didn't really make the guy slip or anything, he just dodged out of the way. Like, he could have just walked a few steps, he didn't need to turn into soap to do this. Anyways, Ricochet wins the trophy back, and we learn the ancient warrior's actually just Maya's son, and they teamed up with Mama to test the kids to make sure Ricochet was responsible and would stop losing everything, which clearly doesn't work because they end the episode leaving the trophy behind, of course. In episode 13, the Flea gets taken undercover by the FBI, or the LBI, the Lucha Bureau of Investigations, as they search for a student at school who's selling wrestling moves to the Hairy Knuckles Academy. This shot of the Flea as James Bond goes so hard. I wish he shot the camera, but yeah, you probably can't have a cartoon where the Flea has that thing on him. The Flea is suspicious of Ricochet and Buena Girl, but of course they wouldn't do something like this. It was all a ploy by the Hairy Knuckles Academy to spy on and steal Ricochet's signature moves, which I gotta admit is actually pretty genius. The twist did get me here, and I don't know, maybe I'm just dumb saying I got plot twisted by Mucha Lucha, but like, this is the same show that has an episode end because the principal steals the Wicked Witch of the West broomstick. This show is anything but predictable. And speaking of unpredictable, I really thought they like shot the Flea or something, because this totally legitimate way I found to even watch Mucha Lucha just randomly cuts out here at the most perfect time. Just watch.
Wow, pretty clever for some guys with tacky haircuts. Now give me that move!
So yeah, media preservation's really important, even if one of the only sources I can find of this media has ads for Camp Lazlo with bears running around, taking up damn near half the screen. But honestly, it really adds to the charm. Like, what if I just had those random ads during my videos? It could be like Subway servers. So the Luchadors end up defeating the Hairy Knuckles Academy, and the Flea apologizes for doubting his friends. But they say it's okay, because they wouldn't have had much of an episode otherwise.
Yeah, yippee-ki-yay-yay-yay.
The next episode has Kid Wombat coming to school from Australia and threatens to take Ricochet's spot as Luchador Supreme of the school. They do pull-ups, and we see the Flea can barely do 1, while Ricochet can do 100, and we know Kid Wombat's gonna come in and do more, but how many more pull-ups do you think Kid Wombat's gonna do? 1,000? 1,000,000?
Infinity!
This joke is simple, but probably one of my favorite gags of the whole season. This killed me. Buena Girl learns from the record books that Kid Wombat's father is their parents' age and fought against the Flea's father while training to be Luchador Supreme, and it also says he doesn't have a son, so they learn Kid Wombat's like Billy Madisoning this, and is actually a 43-year-old man, and Ricochet really has to beat him up and tell him no one ever became Luchador Supreme by cheating, and like, yeah, you also don't become Luchador Supreme by losing to 10-year-olds. He's just wash. Overall, it's a really fun episode, so let's move on. Episode 14 has the kids going around the neighborhood selling churros for a school fundraiser. It's kind of like chocolate with nuts, but like churros with cinnamon. The Flea's unable to sell churros because he can't stop eating them, even when he finds a large lady on a diet who the Flea convinces to break her diet, then realizing his love for the churro, dives inside the woman to grab said churro. And then the Flea has a romantic montage with the churro. So the Flea's about to be expelled from the school, but fortunately, they find an ultimate churro cookbook, and they realize they can make some churros to give to the school instead. But even these awful, overcooked churros drive the Flea so crazy, he begins eating the raw ingredients, aka raw sugar and raw eggs. And the egg is raw as in directly from the source. This whole scene is like a manic addiction scene, but with churros, so it's goofy. The Flea goes to school without any money or churros, but fortunately there's a churro churro eating contest with a cash prize. While this seems like a slam dunk, the Flea's all churroed out and gets into a divorce argument with the churro he made love to earlier. Flea ends this argument with his wife by eating her. Yep, the Flea's a wife eater. So the Flea wins money for being an abusive spouse and is able to stay at the academy as we end the episode with the Flea being rolled away from the fair where he hallucinates all the foods talking to him. It's actually kinda creepy, like maybe this is one of those movies or games where at the end you learn it's all a dream inside the head of a kid at the hospital or something. Maybe all of Mucha Lucha's a dream inside a kid's head. That actually explains so much. In the latter half of episode 14, Ricochet and Abuelito get into a tag team fight against this grocer at the mini market who lost a big fight to Ricochet's grandpa years ago. This grocer wears a bag on his head out of shame and is rematching Abuelito to regain his dignity, and it's pretty cool to learn more of his backstory and see what he wrestled like in his prime. It's pretty funny seeing this weak attempt at fighting. Meanwhile, this lady's asking where the detergent is and stuff, and the Flea's messing with the floor polisher. Abuelito decides to take a dive and let the grocer win, settling this multi-decade long grudge, stating sometimes there's more honor in losing, and overall, it's a fun episode. I always appreciate seeing more of the backstory of Ricochet's family, so while it's not the most interesting episode on its own, it makes me appreciate the series overall just a bit more. In episode 15, the Flea pogo sticks into the yard of La Bruja, an evil witch that lives in the neighborhood with tons of baseballs left in her yard and no one ever dares to go in, giving us the second time this season where a witch canonically exists. The Flea manages to escape covered in flour, but Ricochet and Buena Girl, seeing the white Flea, believe he's a spirit of his past self. They tend to his every need, but it gets really annoying really fast, so they decide to go to La Bruja's house to put the spirit of the Flea to rest. It turns out La Bruja's just an old lady who bakes goodies of all the luchadors for a bake sale, so the only witch we canonically have in the show so far is the Wicked Witch of the West. The next episode, El Niño Loco, follows the Lucha Libre School Wrestling Club getting stopped on their way to a match by this giant kid that's more like a thunder demon living in the mountain and creating tornadoes. This feels like a very Japanese-inspired design, possibly sharing some traits with the Raijin, the Japanese god of lightning and thunder, and coincidentally, kinda reminds me of the Pokemon Thundurus, just a really cool design made by the storyboard artist of the episode, Ricky Garduno, who made a huge impact on Mucha Lucha as a whole. Another little interesting tidbit from watching Eddie Mort's commentary on this episode is that El Niño Loco was actually designed in flesh here by Jorge Gutierrez, which is really cool to know. The episode kind of turns into a giant party boss fight against this god of nature. Like, that sounds like a Final Fantasy boss right there. It's really interesting to hear Eddie's thoughts on this episode, because he says it might be a little too superhero-like as opposed to luchador-like, and while that's a valid point, I think it works really well in this episode for the characters to be kind of like the Avengers here. It's fun and fresh. They eventually stop the storming baby, learning he just needed a band-aid for his foot, and they even recruit this giant baby to their wrestling team at the end. The arena they fight in at the end also looks really awesome. In episode 16, the episode plays out kinda like a Stephen King novel with everyone in the school going missing one by one. It turns out they were abducted by this alien collector that has all these luchadors from different planets trapped in glass jars. Wow, he really is a collector. He's voiced by Carlos Alazraqui, who voices Ricochet and Senor Hasbina, but he voices him in such a unique way, it's not like any other character in the show I can think of, yet it's so familiar.
Don't struggle too much, little friends. You'll fog up the cases and ruin your resale value.
I don't know if it's closest to Mr. Crocker from the Fairly Odd Parents, but looking through these pictures people make on DeviantArt, collaging all the voice actors, I noticed Carlos Alazraqui voiced the Taco Bell dog. Yeah, they said, we got a show about a Mexican masked wrestler, bring me the Taco Bell dog. And like, yeah, this is how I learned the Taco Bell dog didn't actually talk in the commercials. I can't believe a fast food chain would lie to me. But yeah, yeah, this episode's a 24-minute space adventure, and it's fun. It reminds me a lot of Atomic Betty in a way, just kinda snappy, flash space hijinks, coming out the same year, coincidentally enough. Probably the most interesting aspect to the episode is the involvement of these side characters like Electricity. The Collector is also pretty funny, cause he tries to trap them all, but he can't damage his collection either. Also, El Gundamo, the character named the Gundam, gets a Gundam-inspired mecha and fights this giant space alien in a way sorta like another show from 2004, Megas XLR. Man, what a banger. The episode ends with the class creating a giant ring of arms to wrap around and trap the alien, the gravity in the ship turning on, slamming them all to the ground, giving them an opportunity to defeat the Collector. They head back to Earth in the spaceship the alien lets them borrow, but Buena Girl wonders if he could still come after them sometime. Ricochet's confident he'll be too busy, and I thought to myself, what could he be collecting now that he'd be too busy? Quarters with the states on the back, Pokemon cards? But nah, they just stole his ID and now he's getting harassed by the ID robot.
Stop! Present identification!
I'm telling you, it's me! Kears Vilsden!
Episode 17 focuses on the style of luchadors, and Ricochet just has so much drip, everyone's in love with him. There's this fashion influencer teacher guy who comes to the school and just roasts some of the character designs, but then we see Ricochet's hat is sentient and wants to get revenge on Los Pantalones Elegantes, and just kinda takes over Ricochet. So they fight this possessed Ricochet who uses these retro clothing moves, but the stylish man realizes his hat is the one he abandoned as a child and runs out wearing his old outfit. I guess it just magically fits him because it was Ricochet's size a second ago, and the same with his old outfit because now the Flea's wearing this fancy suit, and I was like, oh haha, that's funny I guess. But then we see an evil smile on this newly abandoned hat, showing us the Mucha Lucha universe is full of vengeful hats who seek to hurt those who abandon them. The second half of this episode has the election episode every show had, where you have the try-hard candidate like Buena Girl, and the chaotic one who makes crazy promises, like the Flea, who talks about having chewy shoes and eating butter snacks, which is just a stick of butter, which is so gross. We get the tension of two friends fighting against each other, and on top of this, the pirate wrestler, Tibor the Terrible, is trying to get everyone to vote for the Flea because he has some mutiny scheme to take over. We eventually get a 3v3 match for the student council, and they use these democracy and tyranny themed attacks. Oh, that just looks wrong. They all end up piled up in the ring, with the first one out becoming the new president, and it actually turns out to be Snowpea, who was caught in the crossfire, the absolute legend. Overall, it's a fine episode. I maybe would have liked it more if there wasn't a clock blinking in the bottom left corner the whole time. Like, that had me captivated. It looks so familiar, but I haven't seen it in so long. Does anyone know what it is? I thought it was like a Dish TV reminder or something, but it's been decades since I've last seen that. Episode 18 has El Rey sneaking out at night, where he wrestles in this underground toy wrestling ring. There's this big Japanese mecha lizard, because why not? We've already had 5 mechas this season so far. Ricochet dresses up like a toy, kinda, and him and El Rey fight alongside this security guard who seeks his revenge on the metallic lizard for his missing limbs. Ricochet's concern for his action figure sneaking out like a mother is pretty funny, and in the end, after defeating the Meso Lizard together, it's really funny Ricochet's the one who has to sneak home. Like, what are you hiding for? You just saved him. When El Rey gets home with the giant trophy, he also brings the pan Ricochet wore on his head and daps him up for saving him. While nothing crazy happens, I appreciate a sweet little ending like this. It feels way more satisfying than having them just lie to each other, or if the episode ended with Ricochet sleeping. In the next episode, the Flea's on a losing streak and faces potential expulsion if he doesn't win his next match, which just so happens to be against Ricochet. Ricochet. The Flea begs Ricochet to throw the match for him, which he refuses to do, given the honor and tradition of luchadors, but eventually submits and lets the Flea win their match. The Flea showboats his victory a little too much, which angers Ricochet, who immediately challenges the Flea to a rematch. And we kinda just repeat the first couple minutes again, with the Flea looking for excuses for this rematch, like he injured his foot or has a note from the president, which is actually real here, not just an excuse, but obviously isn't believed by Ricochet. On the way to the match, Ricochet trips on a bunch of random stuff in his room, cause I guess he didn't learn his lesson from having a literal pig man live in his room, so he limps into the ring, reiterating there's no excuses, but the Flea, now having no threat of expulsion, is able to throw the match for his friend, which isn't entirely a good thing, since the winner now has to fight this guy, Lil Bling Bling. It's an okay episode, like a fine concept, but really my biggest problem lies within the structure of the episode. The climactic end fight doesn't have much at stake for me, since the Flea already isn't gonna be expelled since he won the fight earlier. Really, I think they could've just removed the first fight in the episode, and very little would've changed. Also, it kinda goes to show how cutthroat this academy is, cause it doesn't seem like the Flea was on this losing streak for any particular reason. Sometimes you just have a bad week or two, you know? In episode 19, the Flea's fighting his demons here, both metaphorically and literally, as we learn the Flea's biggest fear, besides liquid soap, is that he can't win a match without Ricochet's help. The Flea challenges his demons to a fight in the ring, and they easily defeat him with their anxiety-based attacks. The Flea finally owns up to his fear of not being able to win without Ricochet, and we see admitting he's got a problem is the first step to overcoming it. And although the Flea beats his demons here, they'll continue to face him because he has to take his once every 3 month shower, and the demons have even brought liquid soap. It's a fine episode. It kinda has the format of more modern shows like a Steven Universe or something, where a lot of the answers in the combat are found within, which is pretty common in writing, but in more modern cartoons feels like it's very influenced by anime, which segues into our next episode, Virtual Luchadores. Ricochet gets addicted to this online game called Luchamon and is set on taking the #1 spot from this user named Rutabaga. All of the luchadors have funny little gamer tags here, like French Twist is just Sacre Blue or El Perito is Power Pop. So it's kind of fun to see what they would use as their tags. I do wonder who would get banned first though, like the Flea's probably an easy pick, but I'd also put my money on Potato Patata Jr. The episode ends with El Rey crying because of how degenerate Ricochet's become, and he just quits Luchamon right on the spot before facing Rutabaga. The rest of the luchadors are still obsessed with defeating Rutabaga though, and the episode ends inside the room of this secret top player.
Who are you, Rutabaga?
You know, I thought Snoopy was kinda like a Pokemon, like he can only say his own name. So does he choose to just say Snoopy? Maybe this is Snoopy's cousin, Rutabaga. The anime-inspired designs are really cool, especially when you look at the original designs made by a board artist, Ricky Garduno. As Eddie mentions in his blog, Ricky's inspired designs were in big part because he had fun, and loved to reference things he watched in his childhood, like Astro Boy and Doraemon. And we even see references to more modern anime like Yu-Gi-Oh here. Also, the Flea plays with an old Aqua Ring game like you'd see at Taco Bell, and I love this game so much, but also found it so frustrating. The coin one was so much better. I'd always win lunch after school with just a handful of coins. Episode 20 starts with a Mucha Lucha version of the Battle of La Puebla from 1862, and although it is a bit inaccurate, as even Ricochet admits, it doubles not only as a fun little gag, but also as a good way to set up the context of the episode, celebrating Cinco de Mayo. La Piñata suggests they make a giant piñata, which is Spanish for piñata, and wouldn't you guess, it turns into a giant mecha that terrorizes the town because the Flea ate all the candy inside. The entire class glass forms into a giant stick to break the piñata, which doesn't work, so they lead him to the candy factory where he eats an entire silo of candy, satiating his appetite and rage, cause like, yeah, screw the people who own the factory, I guess. Though I suppose they get the candy right back after they break the piñata, do they really want the already been chewed candy from the piñata? The second half of this episode's also pretty wacky, with a pet show in which Masked Dog runs away and is caught by an old lady who removes his mask.
You can't see a thing with that ratty old underwear on your head!
I do like that they still call him Masked Dog even without his mask. Like, was he named Masked Dog even as a puppy? Was he born with a mask? It's interesting to see Ricochet doesn't know what Masked Dog looks like without his mask. Like, he thinks this giraffe could be his pet, but the mask doesn't fit the animal, obviously. You could almost argue maybe Masked Dog's new owner is more deserving than Ricochet if he hardly even knows what species Masked Dog is. But then we see Heavy Traffic at the Hairy Knuckles Academy has the dog, and they fight for his ownership. In the end, Masked Dog is actually the one to win the fight, regaining his honor and family, and they even give Heavy Traffic the prize of this little squeak toy to call his own. It's a fun episode, and it's nice to see Masked Dog a little more this season, cause one of my favorite parts of season 1 was everyone just being so chill and fist-bumping Masked Dog whenever they saw him. Episode 21 has the 3 Masqueritas and Pulguita wanting to watch the big wrestling match, but they have to stay home and go to bed while their parents all go and watch. They settle for watching it on TV, but the satellite dish goes out, giving us the second time this video where we're talking about satellite dishes. Still not nearly as much as giant mecha robots. It's a pretty fun episode and is super chaotic, with the group doing this juggling talent act but getting caught in traffic and using their prize money to buy a burro, which turns out to be stolen, so they go to jail and then they escape in a prison break, riding in the back of a truck carrying chickens, which gives them decent designs as they land in the middle of the ring, replacing the actual wrestlers meant to fight here. They fight these big serpent-like wrestlers from India, and I really like their designs and style. The kids obviously can't use their signature moves because their parents would know they snuck out and are in the ring, but luckily when they get caught, the snake guys sneeze and end up getting tied together. You know, it's a bit of a goofy, anticlimactic reason, but they do a good job keeping the episode moving along because they gotta get home before their parents. They pay this blimp guy with the trophy they just won and fall out trying to grab their satellite dish, which they ride home just before their parents get here. The episode's pretty fun and chaotic, but I don't have much insight I can provide here. Like, it's great and all, but it's so fast and chaotic, it's really one you just gotta catch for yourself, I guess. So let's move on. In our second to last episode of the season, the Flea's parents are in dire straits because the well that supplies them with infinite donut batter has run dry. Yeah, apparently there was a donut mountain right outside we've just never seen before, with rivers of donut batter and donuts that grow on trees. So all the luchadors climb up the mountain, competing for the prize of a couple dozen donuts, which seems really small given that they're saving the entire business, but to a kid, that's a lot of donuts. When Ricochet, the Flea, and Buena Girl make it up the mountain, we meet this Sasquatch that harvested all the donuts for a dinner party in his little man cave, and I really love this setup. Like, imagine watching Mucha Lucha here. They get into this big back and forth fight with the Sasquatch, eventually teaming up to become these dental themed attacks. Like, I'd never expect the Flea to become the dental floss of destruction. I don't think he even knows what floss is. Ricochet turns into a dental drill, but just operates like a regular drill, opening the donut batter dam, and then the Sasquatch immediately punches him down into the spot and turns him into like a little Minecraft creature. All hope seems lost, but of all characters, El Rey shows up for the Sasquatch's dinner party, and he even brings a honey glazed brisket, convincing the Sasquatch to let the kids go and open up the dam. So the donut shop is saved. They even brought back a great customer as they see the Sasquatch eating all the donuts in the shop, which makes El Rey sad that his brisket's going to waste. El Rey lives such an interesting life, like he really gets around despite being this small little action figure. We have one final episode to end season 2, but before we do, I wanted to give a quick thanks to my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters: James Bond 3W, Jakira, Luther, Buggy, Luca17, Richard M, Jack C, Flynn Lee, and Paul H. Thank you all so much for your contributions, it really means a lot to me. And if you made it this far, I'd really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. I'm trying to get to 25k by the end of the year, so that'd make me really happy. So let's move on to the final episode. The final episode starts with a science fair where El Gundamo builds the LuchaBot 3000, a training robot that helps the students test their wrestling skills. He's pretty hardcore and just asks the luchadors to do moves they've never done before and then stamps them with a giant F. Like, look at this, they even snatched Snoopy's wig. The teachers eventually become robots along with the rest of the school, leaving Gundamo as humanity's last hope. Well, the Flea's human too, but pretends to be a robot and later proves to Gundamo he's a human by literally vomiting on him. I guess I should just be used to that by now. So Gundamo fights the LuchaBot once more, but he gets the help from the rest of the students, who we learned weren't turned into robots but just stuffed in a locker. And wouldn't you know, they chain together and turn into a makeshift mecha to fight the big LuchaBot now, because of course they do. You really thought we'd have the finale of season 2 without a giant robot fight? All the students wrestle their robot counterparts, which is pretty fun and definitely adds to the scale of it all to see everyone fight, because we don't often see them. Penny Plutonium even incorporates her science project from the beginning of the episode, this airbag lucha mask, which I actually thought was really impressive, before everyone else did. So all the robots are defeated, being tied to a rocket and launched to outer space. Gundamo gets an A for this, not for the LuchaBot that nearly took over the school, but for building a rocket, and yeah, I guess that is pretty impressive. I really like that they make the season finales full episodes for both seasons so far. It just really adds to the stakes of it all, and it's a nice little send-off. Overall, season 2 was a fun time. Writing-wise, it felt similar to season 1, but there was a lot of nice updates to the animation and backgrounds, and the talented staff behind the show grew even larger. While it may be a show people struggle to remember specific details and stories from, it's such a fun show to enjoy in the moment. It's so chaotic and fun with so much love and research put into it. Like, I'm kinda in a Mucha Lucha hangover right now after making this video, but from all the comments y'all have shared with me, we can definitely tell Mucha Lucha was anything but forgettable. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next week. Alright, bye.